Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, as always, Alex, and with me tonight I have Brad.
Good evening.
Well, to take a positive spin out of the two results we've had, we're undefeated after two games, which is better than we've been the last couple of weeks, I guess. We'll start with the Ipswich game, which was, I guess, the one that felt more like 2 points dropped, given the fact that we were leading 2-1 in that game, and then even at 2-2, Diamande had a great chance in the 90th minute or late in the game to win it for us. Um, what have you made of the fact that we continuously concede these late goals and it's dropping us so many points?
Um, look, we keep talking about the fact that our goal scoring's been great, but our defence has been terrible, and it's just another repeat performance. Here we are, dying moments of a game, with another wide open box for players to drift in and out of and score something that looks pretty sloppy. But I think it just gets back to what we were talking about last show, was that it just appears that there's a real lack of accountability defensively across the whole squad. And this is now, the third or fourth time we've had our hearts broken in the last moments of a game.
Well, in fact, I think the statistic is 9 goals in the 83rd minute or later, and I think it's cost us 9 points, which is roughly the amount of points that we actually sit outside of the playoff places, which is pretty remarkable when you consider we've looked so awful all season, to one degree or another, and the fact that we would actually be sitting in the playoff places if we would cut out those late goals, it probably underlines just how poor or how average this division actually is.
You're dead right, and I think if we have a real good look at the teams that are in form, there's realistically probably 4 to 6 quality sides who you would expect to be, above average championship sides. And then there's a real gap between, say, the top 6 and then the next 15 or so sides that are just inept and could beat anyone on any night, depending on which way the ball bounces off the post. That's sort of how it appears to be in this division. I mean, even it wasn't that long ago that we were sort of saying that teams like Birmingham or even Fulham have got the potential to grow through the division, and there they are wallishing around with us. And probably the only team that obviously is probably outside of that top 4 or 5 that we know could potentially do something is Derby, and that's only because they've got some of our better players there.
Well, the ball's certainly bouncing the right way for Jarrod Bowen at the moment, and he got another goal against Ipswich, which I think takes him to 9 goals for the season. I think he's still close to, if not uh, at the top of the table in terms of top goals scored. Uh, j- I don't know where this has come from. I mean, in pre-season, he obviously scored a couple of great goals, and he looked promising in games last season. But to think that basically in his first season of senior football to be just taking the championship by storm is incredible.
Look, it is, and probably the thing that is most impressive, obviously, if you're scoring goals, you're playing games and you're getting time. And I think probably the thing that impressed me the most is one of the stats I was looking at about the leading goal scorers is he's now played just as many minutes as any striker in the competition, which actually shows more than just the goals he's scored, but the fact that he's pretty much one of the first players on a team sheet each week. And probably the thing that's exciting is his goals have actually been top draws. Some of them have been absolute crackers.
And he's not even playing as a striker, really. I mean, he's
No, he's
generally
not.
playing on the wing.
That's right. And I think one of the stats I saw was one of the other players in the league, it might have been one of the Wolves forwards or something, has scored the same amount of goals as him, but had something like 20 more shots on goal. So I thought the fact that his conversion rate, when he gets near the edge of that box, I'd be a pretty nervous opposition defender
Yeah,
at the moment. Yeah.
absolutely. And I guess the other player we've touched on before, who's just been in outstanding form, is Allan McGregor, and he showed it again. He saved a penalty against Ipswich. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to sort of hold on for that victory, but he's just been in remarkable form, and I think he's actually just been named our Player of the Month.
Yeah, look, no surprise. And I'm glad you actually mentioned that, Alex, because I think when we're talking about team spirit and accountability over the last couple of podcasts now, nothing to me pointed out where our problem lies more than McGregor pulls off potentially what is a point-saving save, and the response from his own teammates was pretty limp.
Yeah,
I think he got one or two
yeah.
pats on the back moments later. But let's face it, go back to when the team in recent years has felt together and accountable. You know, obviously when it was Jakupovic, he promoted this sort of thing. But there'd be cuddles, there'd be, you know, pretty much piling on top of him. And that to me sums up how I think this squad must feel. You know, there he is, effectively winning you points off his own glove. And I think it was two sort of pretty average responses from our players saying, "Oh, well done, mate," rather than what we would think you would be effectively tackling your own keeper with excitement.
Yeah, and it definitely underlines the fact it's a very disjointed squad. I mean, three of the back four that started, I think, against Ipswich, I know for sure they did it against Millwall, Intamori, Hector, and Aina are all Chelsea loanees. So in a sense, they should have a decent amount of camaraderie between the three of them. But in terms of the rest of the squad, in terms of the rest of the back four, whether it's Dawson, whether it's McGregor, yeah, it's very disconnected.
Look, it is, and I think it's pretty easy to have a look at the players that have come in and say, yep, okay, they've got to have time to gel, or even with the manager, they've got to have time to gel. But we all know in the past, especially in the Premier League season, okay, there's excitement, but players step up, individuals really step up and say, do you know what, it doesn't matter whether Steve Bruce was against the wall or Phelan was about to lose his job or whatever was going on, someone stood up. You know, Curtis Davies was very much aligned there for a while. Would he ever get back into the side? And the next thing you know, he's captaining a Premier League side and putting his body on the line like no defender in the competition. So what's disappointed me is some of our players that have stayed, including Dawson. You know, you've got to stand up and actually command from the other players what's expected.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's quite worrying as well. I mean, Dawson it seems to. I mean, he's not getting any younger, so there's that element as well. But the fact that three of his back four, well, maybe disregarding Hector, but two of the others, whether it's Clark or whether it's Damori and Aina at right fullback, are quite young and inexperienced. So there's a lot of expectation on Dawson to sort of pull that defense together and to marshal the defense, and it just doesn't seem to be working at the moment.
No, look, it doesn't, and I think part of the problem with all of this is obviously Dawson hasn't got the confidence he should have, and therefore it's pretty hard to jump up and lead. But I still point back to that Curtis Davies example where you'd remember there was a time there he was on the outer and people were questioning whether he was ever going to get back. And when he came back, he really showed that even if he's not good with his touch or he's not winning every 50-50, the way he bossed and moved those players around him meant that he didn't have to work as hard. And that's what Dawson's got to learn here. I mean, come on, you've got fit, very strong, young, impressionable defenders all around you. He could make a hell of an easier job for himself if he was really the commander of all things in that back line. But it just seems like he's happy to be part of the sort of the average, so to speak.
Yeah, and I guess we had the opposite issue at Millwall where we were able to finally keep a clean sheet. I can't remember the last time we managed a clean sheet, probably against Bolton actually, all the way back then. But then we weren't able to score down the other end. So it's almost like we went from one extreme to the other, and it was good to not see a late goal conceded as we've tended to have those almost every game these days. But again, I guess with both games, do you feel it was a case of 2 points dropped?
Yeah, look, I think the Ipswich game was definitely 2 points dropped. In the scheme of things over the two games, I know there's been sort of talk about where Millwall fit into the current form line, and yes, they're down with us and so on. But I always felt like, okay, we're playing Millwall away. That's reasonably tough as far as an away game should go. I'd be happy with a point, but obviously the Ipswich result was, I think, really was 3 points dropped. The 2 points dropped.
And Millwall, I think, recently managed to beat Cardiff at home, so it's really, as you say, it's not actually that disappointing to get a point away there. And as you say, it's a tough place to go. I mean, my first live experience watching City was back in 2010 when we travelled to Millwall and we lost 4-0 there. So
yeah, exactly.
memories of that ground.
Who really wants to play Millwall midweek away? I mean, and to be honest as well, probably the thing that surprised me was obviously I know I read pretty much a lot of the match report and the comments after the match from the managers before I actually got to see most of the game due to the time difference. But I really felt like their boss was quite happy that he held us to a draw. And I sort of found that interesting. I think he was quoted talking about how expensive our squad was, which if he's got that sort of mindset, he clearly felt like we were probably going to pinch all the points. And I know he made some comment about how well they defended. So I don't know whether it was false praise or not, but certainly from our perspective, Millwall point away, great. But Ipswich home, crikey, we've got to be getting 3 points.
Yeah, and I guess there was a lot of discussion about the team tactics and selection. Grzycki was left on the bench for the Millwall game, and then the substitutions were quite interesting. I think Campbell was the first one to come off, and then Dicko might have been the next to come off, and I think the third sub might even have been Bowen going off. So I think we essentially substituted off our three most attacking players progressively through the game, which I don't know if that would then suggest Slutsky was quite anxious to keep the point, given our propensity to concede those late goals recently, or if it was just a matter of just trying a different sort of combination. But first of all, with Grzycki not starting the game, what do you make of that? And then I guess as well, the tactics throughout the game.
Yeah, look, I was probably a bit surprised that Grzycki didn't start, but I think probably the fact that he's conscious of the fixtures coming up, the fact there's midweek games, these sorts of things, he probably felt like, well, I can use Grzycki for half an hour or something to try and change the game if we need it. Certainly, I understood why he brought Dicko off, because I think Dicko's been a bit maligned lately. I think he's probably been one of our best players, if not our best two or three players. And obviously, Slutsky sees the formation he's playing at the moment as Dicko being very, very important in that. So I think he probably had one eye on keeping him a little bit in cotton wool for the weekend. But probably the only thing that did surprise me a little bit was the fact that Campbell came off when he did. I mean, it only gave Diamonde about 6 or 7 minutes or something in the scheme of things. And I sort of felt like, well, if he was thinking about giving Dicko a little bit of a breather, that Campbell probably needed it too. But I didn't really have a problem, other than I still have the problem with the actual lineup, but I still have a little bit of a problem that even with the Millwall game, I was more surprised that Myler didn't start.
Yeah.
And that knowing that we're going to Millwall, knowing that we're going to have to, tie the laces tight and get in there, I thought Myler might have been a better option in that central midfield space.
Yeah, especially with the suspension to Larson.
Yeah, look, exactly. That's probably even more important in this case. Is the reason why he should have come straight in. Looking at who was in that original that starting lineup, I still feel like we're getting something wrong with the way we defend all over the park, not just at the back. And I think Myler might have helped that, mind you. 0-0 at Millwall, clean sheet. I hate to say you take a point because we should be trying to take 3 from everything, but I still think it's not a bad result.
Yeah, and now undefeated in 2 games, it's something to build on. Bristol City at home, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I guess the downside, of course, being that Ehab being at the game, there's been a lot of talk in the last few days about Slutsky's future and the fact that it sounds as if the owners were really hoping that he would be able to get the win at Millwall, and that the fact that we weren't able to get the win might not have been enough to save his job. There was a lot of talk yesterday that he was actually going to get sacked yesterday. It now sounds as if it's been delayed until after the Bristol City game, so maybe that will be his last chance. A lot of talk about the fact that Nigel Adkins has been in the director's box at recent games, that his long-term assistant was down scouting Bristol City, so perhaps setting it up the fact that they might be coming in to manage the team on Saturday. Now looks not the case, but what do you make of, first of all, Ehab being at the game at Millwall, the sort of the clouds looming around Slutsky, and then his potential replacement?
Well, I mean, they all roll into this absolute dog's breakfast of a situation we find ourselves in. We've got a manager who is clearly defeated, and for one reason or another, no matter what side of the fence you sit on, all of the arguments, whether it's Allan out or Slutsky's not up to it or whatever, we all know that Slutsky effectively has been dealt the shit sandwich here, like Mike Phelan got last year. Although they're quite different comparison between the two, because I think Phelan's actually got a better tactical nous than Slutsky has. they're really in the same boat. It doesn't really matter what sort of start we had have got. The players aren't necessarily the right players for the way Slutsky wants to play, if he even knows exactly which way he wants to play. And Ehab being there probably just, it wouldn't surprise me if he was there just in spite to keep some rumours going that there is going to be a change. And Adkins was there because Ehab knew that the BBC Umberside will jump on it and start running with it, and then he's going to get. It's all just smacks of this comedy act that we see all the time. The fact that Adkins, long-time assistant scouting Bristol, Ehab probably paid him as a couple of hours just to do it, just to have a bit of a laugh. It wouldn't surprise me, but I think we all know that realistically, no matter what happens this weekend, it appears that Slutsky's gone, and mentally, I think he has gone. He's checked out. His comments after both the Ipswich game and the Millwall game were very much of a manager who thinks he's gone.
Which I think is a shame. I really
it
think
is. It is, because I think he's refreshingly honest because of the language barrier as well. And I think that his honesty is effectively what I think is keeping him sort of somewhat romantically on the positive side with the supporters, because they feel sorry for him. They really feel that here is a guy who wanted to make a name for us. His stars were aligned with ours. And that generally gets you halfway there.
Yeah, and it's quite funny to see the really stark comparison between him and Marco Silva, who in a lot of ways are in the same boat, that they've both learnt English, come to England, come to the Premier League or the Championship with this ambition of managing in England. Silva, I think, because he's that young, attractive manager, he had a great playing style, he had that great home record. There was a lot of enthusiasm behind him in that sense. But then in his interviews, he was much more of a detached, calm, cold sort of mannerisms in a lot of ways when he was in those interviews. Whereas Slutsky's the quite opposite. He's obviously the, less attractive, more burly sort of manager who initially you look at him and you think, oh, geez, he's in the Steve Bruce sort of mould, or Nigel Pearson perhaps even being a bit more dour. But then you hear him talk and he's very jolly, he's very happy. As you say, he's refreshingly honest. And he's a very attacking manager. So we're one of the top scorers in the division still, but we just can't keep a clean sheet, can't stop those goals coming in.
Look, you're right. And I think he would really benefit from the fact that he could bring in a couple of players, be it loan or otherwise, in January, that finish off what his game plan is. Clearly, he's an attacking manager, and we're scoring as many goals as anyone. So he's getting one thing right. The key thing, and I think I harped on it last week, and not to say that I'm an expert by far, but I think the issue is we don't have any depth or even headline depth in our defence. We are still makeshift. We are still question marks over everyone in that defence. Even Hector in recent weeks, we know that he's a quality player, but he hasn't looked like the player that we know he can be or has been at times. I would like to see Slutsky given the chance to say, do you know what, in January, bring in a few more that you want, and then we'll see how we go. Because we saw what happened last time we make a change to manager, especially when it was at the death knock. We're chasing our tail. We've still got time to turn this around to, I certainly wouldn't say a successful season, but an accomplished one anyway.
And it's, I guess, really disappointing because I think if he is to get sacked in the next week or two, I would hope that he doesn't give up on English football. I would hope he seems a really promising manager, and I think if he goes to a club that will actually sign the players that he wants, that will suit his game style, as you're saying, he would be a great success. I think there's a lot of issues at the club where he's been pretty much handed this squad, and I think in a lot of ways, I don't know how seriously it is. I've heard talk about the fact that one of our recruitment strategies was to sort of go out and buy players that scored goals against us, because the theory went, if they scored against us, they must be decent players, and we went out, we got Dicko, we got Irvine. I don't know if that's true, but it obviously happened that way for those two. It's just a ramshackle sort of squad that we've assembled, and obviously with Kingsley, we've essentially sold Clucas to Swansea and said, right, do you have a left back that we can grab? Great, we'll take him. So there doesn't seem to have been a whole lot of strategy in our recruitment that I think.
Mate, you've hit it on the head.
Yeah.
You've hit it on the head. Transactions. That's really what they've been. They've been.
Yeah.
You can almost go back now to the Phil Brown era where, Peter Halmosy plays a fantastic game against us when he's at Plymouth, and the next thing you know, he's in our squad, and we paid millions for him. So I think you're dead right. It's no coincidence that now, other than the Clucas Swansea deal and getting a player back, that we have effectively picked players who have had a day out against us. And I would be surprised if Ehab even knew who Irvine was before that day that he rocked up, scores against us and gets sent off. Probably getting himself sent off was the best thing because Ehab saw him. And that's pretty much where we're at. The one thing that you can take some heart in, and I hope he gets the time to do it, but whether we've got the patience or the time to wait, is that Slutsky's whole record as a manager has been attacking, but he's very rarely had teams that have ended up at the end of a season or international campaign without a positive goal difference. And the one thing that's changed, obviously, at Hull is that now we've got effectively a negative one, and I think it's more because of who he has to select from. All of those other clubs he has had, if not total right, but he's picked the players, especially the national team, it's his call. Whereas here he is with us, and effectively he's been handed 90% of a squad without really much choice, and that's the problem.
Lucas, Diarmi. He's got away from Flint and he'll shoot! Oh yes indeed, that's a great goal! Mo Diarmi hits the corner flag about as hard as he hit that shot. It's flown into the back of the net, and that should really be the match for Hull. 3-0 to the good.
Well, we'll talk about the Bristol City game now, and there's obviously a pretty famous memory in our history about facing Bristol City at Wembley, Dean Windass, that moment that just had to be. But we've also had some pretty decent results in recent seasons. I mean, Diarmi's goal against them just a couple of seasons ago on the way to promotion, absolute belter. Diarmi himself, no stranger to a pretty cracking goal for us at Wembley as well. But they're a team that we seem to do quite well against, and of course the way that the season's going, they're a B team at home. All signs seem to point to a positive result for us.
Yeah, look, it could, but a lot of it will come back to, I think, whether or not the players feel like they're already past it. There's obviously a confidence issue there. I would love to be positive. I would love to be, considering the fact that it's another romantic event. We're going to play Bristol City. They hate us. We constantly show them how far superior we are. And then when we're really down and out, they remind us that you're only as good as the last time you play them. So I think probably the thing that I do have some faith in is I'd rather face Bristol than say Wolves again at the moment. And if Slutsky is going to have any chance of holding his job, we really do need a performance this week. And who knows, Ehab's probably made his mind up. But I would like to think that at least if the players could do the right thing this week and get the result, that at least Slutsky could hold his head up to say, look, I gave it a crack with the resources I supposedly was given, and I tried.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, if we do manage to get the win, and Bristol City aren't slouches this season. I think they've only had the 3 losses for the season so far, with a pretty abnormal loss to, I think it was Preston yesterday morning, or this morning even perhaps. Actually, I think it was yesterday morning, being quite unexpected. If we were to get the win against them, I find it hard to see Slutsky getting the sack on the back of a win, but stranger things have happened.
Yeah, look, I think you're right. I
Yeah.
think that, I don't know, maybe it's just this constant Ehab talk that keeps coming up, but I almost feel like it just wouldn't surprise me if he does put out a good side this week, they win, and he still gets the sack. That's just the way I think Ehab will think, oh, here's another way I can stick it to the supporters and get a second-rate manager in to replace someone who might have turned a corner. That seems to be Ehab's method at the moment. But I don't know. I've got a bit of a feeling with Bristol that if you look at their results, they have been scoring goals. I think they had one game against Leeds that they didn't score. But in recent games, they've been scoring a couple of goals. So they would have to bank themselves coming up to our paddock that, Hull haven't got a great defence and we've been consistently scoring 2 or excuse me, 3 goals. But I do feel that the one thing that probably came out of the Preston game the other night was that on the counter they really looked a bit lost. And although the goals, and I must admit I haven't seen the whole game, but I made sure I watched some of it. Let's face it, Preston have been struggling, to say the least, with some of their results. And I think the fact that they were able to go to Bristol's dig and pinch the points means that we'd have to bank ourselves to be able to score a couple of goals as well.
And I guess it's quite positive with the way that Slutsky lined us up against Millwall with 2 up top, which was great to see. I mean, we started the season with 2 up top with Campbell and Hernandez, and after the Hernandez injury, we sort of reverted to a 1 up top setup because I think Slutsky didn't have a whole lot of confidence in the strikers that we had below Hernandez. But we've seen, I mean, Dicko scoring a goal against Ipswich is a great sign of his sort of finishing ability. That we've seen a couple of times now, and Campbell as well has scored a couple of tidy goals. So if we can see the 2 of them up top together, and I think we were even saying it on the podcast last week, that they can really complement each other.
Look, they can, and both of them working well together gives us a little bit of time for the midfield to actually, be able to fall in behind them and defend. Even on the weekend, to see the way, Dicko was effectively a one-man show. He still played very well, but I actually think the fact that the ball was rebounding back out of our attack sometimes was catching our midfielders wandering. And playing the 2 up top, I actually think brings the whole game up the park for us. And defensively, if we've actually got more players behind the ball, but in a unified way, we should defensively be better. And it's probably no surprise that we ended up over the Millwall game not conceding a goal as well. Is that I think the fact that we're actually defending a bit better as a team. We're still way away from where we need to be to even be a top 6 or 8 team. But there were some signs there that we can do it, besides the last minute against Ipswich, of course.
Yeah. Do you see any obvious positions that might be changed against Bristol City? I mean, Grzycki coming into the starting lineup would probably be the main obvious one. Do we see any other changes? Maybe we touched on the fact that Myler in midfield might have been a good position for him, and obviously Larson back from suspension as well, who Slutsky really seems to rate because Larson continues to start a lot of our games. Perhaps Myler over Larson, or do you see one of them coming back in?
Look, from a results perspective, I actually think Larson coming back in would be good. I've often said that I still think Myler's a hard worker. He does, bleed black and amber, and for a guy who's not obviously one of the most skillful midfielders you'll see, I do back him to do a job, but I think we've actually got to get past that and say, do you know what, we want to actually be a far superior team who can play the ball the way Slutsky wants to play it, attack, one-touch football. Myler's last outing at home, if I remember, his turnover of the ball on his passing was horrible.
Well, something really interesting that I didn't know about Myler. I think I'd heard it and assumed it was a joke, but heard it confirmed by Myler himself in one of his FIFA videos that I happened to be watching. But I didn't realize that he's genuinely colorblind, so he has issues distinguishing reds and yellows, which I find as a footballer to be absolutely amazing, because people have pointed out that his worst games tend to be against teams that play in red, because he had the game against Forest, which was awful this season, and there was the FA Cup game against Arsenal, I think, where he basically played the ball across goal for Jarrod to tap in. And he does seem to have these really off days against red teams. And obviously Bristol City wearing red, perhaps he isn't the one to come into the team.
Well, maybe that was the whole reason for our pink away kit not long ago. But I'm telling you one thing, whether it's true or not, I'm going to start using it as an excuse myself. But look, there could be something in that, I'm not sure. But I do remember watching the last home game thinking, do you know what, this is not acceptable.
Yeah.
And not to single out him, I'm only using it because it's an example I can remember, but we've got to get to the point now where we have to continually improve as a squad and feel like we're getting better. And I honestly think that if we got promoted tomorrow, Myler wouldn't fit in that squad.
No.
And we actually need to start thinking about the fact that when we did get promoted last time, we had the core of a Premier League squad. And that's really what it's starting to show again with some of the teams up the top of the tables, that they've got squads that are not far away from being Premier League ready. And that's what we've got to get to. And even Grosicki, Polish superstar, scores goals, whatever, his attitude's still got to change. It's not about him, it's about the team. And I think he proved on the Ipswich game that a couple of times there, the way he was sort of, I don't know, frustrated or showing emotion towards some of his teammates, that's where you want Dawson to pull his head in and say, hang on a minute, mate, you're no superstar on the defensive side of things either. We're a team here, and this is how we're going to do it and turn this around.
Well, hopefully we can start to turn that around against Bristol City. Do you have a score prediction for this one?
Well, as you know, I think I predicted 2-1 for the Ipswich game and was robbed.
Yeah, very close.
So I think this week, actually, and this is the only time I'm probably going to really say that I'm confident, is I think we'll actually draw again. I think we'll have a 2-2 draw or a 3-3 draw. I really do, because I just don't see our defensive frailties changing overnight. And I think that the time's come to make a real structural change to that defence, even dropping players and trying something different. I mean, the fact that we saw Clark not in the last lineup in defence concerned me a little bit. He's not a superstar, but we know that he's probably one of the better options. That sort of wing-back role he can provide for us is sort of going to help us. And I think it's probably 2 or 3 would be my pick for this week.
The reason I laugh at that is because last week, of course, you with your 2-1 tip very close to being correct, but I tipped a draw last week. And you tipping the draw this week, and I'm going to be going for a 3-1 home win. I'm feeling quite confident about this one. I think it is, as we've been saying all podcasts, it's the game where the players really need to stand up. There's been all of the talk around Slutsky, Dawson, Myler, all of the other leaders in that squad, Campbell and McGregor, all of them need to be pulling the team together and saying, this is on us. We need to turn this form around. We need to show the gaffer that we've got his back. And they're going to pull out a performance that will blow Bristol City off the park. And I'm really backing us to go out there and get a very positive result.
Oh, I hope so. And look, you're right. When you just named those players there, I felt anyway, especially against Millwall, that there's a couple of set pieces there. I can see Dicko being pretty vocal. Yeah. I mean, the guy's been at the club 5 minutes, and he seemed to be the only one that was really shouldering the weight of expectations. So, hang on, guys, we could do this and do that, and not so much telling blokes what to do, but there was some leadership there. Now, we know he's an experienced player and he knows his job, but still at a new club, you've got to find your feet. But the fact that we could see it from him and not from others was pretty disappointing. And Hector especially. I mean, I know Dawson we've talked about earlier on, but Hector's got every physical attribute to be the best defender in the competition. But he just doesn't appear to want to really boss that position, and that's what we're after.
Well, hopefully we can build on the couple of draws that we've had in the last week, and we can get the result against Bristol City. Start to move up the table away from the wrong end of the wrong end of the division, and hopefully get a few decent results on the board. But thank you for being on tonight, Brad.
Thanks for having me, mate. Good to speak to you and everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, everyone, for listening in. Hopefully we can get those 3 points, and next week will be a very positive episode if that's the case. But until next time, come on, City. You've been listening to the official Hull City Australia podcast. For more discussion, join us on Facebook in the Hull City AFC Australian Supporters Group, or follow us on Twitter at Hull City AFC Oz. The music was created by Amber and Black.
There's no turning back 'cause you're out.